Hello, my friends. This is Baal Kadmon, and I'd like to thank you for watching and or listening to this podcast. Today I'm going to read you another chapter from my upcoming book, Samael, A History, which is currently in pre-release on Amazon. But before I do, I want to give a shout out to my dear friend Serafia for creating this amazing cover for the book. I love it. And she also created my logo, by the way. Thank you, Serafia, for your great work and for being such a good friend. I really appreciate it. Her site is serafiamagic.com. In other news, my latest course, What the Fuck is an NFT, is currently in pre-release, and wow, the response has been amazing. I know it's not what I'm commonly known for, but those who know me know that I'm pretty steeped in the blockchain world. If you're interested in enrolling in the pre-release, the link is in the description box below. I now present you a chapter from my book, Samael, A History. This chapter discusses the meaning of his name. I hope you enjoy it. The meaning of the name Samael. There has been some controversy around the name Samael. Some say that it means blindness of God, while others say it means poison of God. I feel the poison of God is the correct meaning, and I will discuss why that is in this chapter. Before I get into that, I would like to mention that several names have been ascribed to him. Aside from Samael, he is also known as the Angel of Death. We know this from the Targum Jonathan, Genesis 3:6, and the woman beheld Samael, the Angel of Death, and countless other examples. Other names include Samil, Salmael, Satanil or Satanel, and of course, Satan. But we will ignore the Satan naming convention for now, since in his case it is a description of his function as an adversary. In Hebrew, the name Samael is spelled Samech Mem Aleph Lamed, from right to left. The first two letters are Samech and Mem, making the sound Sum. And the last two letters are Aleph and Lamed. Aleph and Lamed spells El, which means God. In modern Hebrew, the word for illicit drugs is Samim. As you can see, the first two letters are shared with the name Samael. In the biblical Hebrew, Samim was often a benign word for spices and sometimes incense. Exodus chapter 30, verse 34. And the Lord said unto Moses, Take unto thee sweet spices. In Hebrew, Vayomer Adonai el Moshe, Kach lecha samim. These samim were burned in the temple every day as incense and offerings. However, the meaning would start to evolve after the Second Temple period, which is about 516 BC to 70 AD. For much of this period of time, Aramaic was the main language spoken by most Jews. In Aramaic, the term sama meant medicine. At least that was one of the meanings. In Hebrew, the word was eventually replaced with the word trufa, which is usually the term for healing medicine, which is still used to this day. In Mishnaic Hebrew, 1st through 4th century AD, the word sam started to mean a substance that could influence human behavior and thought, very much like a drug. What do illicit drugs do, and how do they create their mind-altering states? Of course, through a kind of toxic and poisonous effect. To add to this, in Arabic, the word sum or sma actually means poison in certain texts. Samael has a complicated history in Judaism, but overall his reputation is one of evil, and thus it makes sense that the sam in his name equals poison or toxin. Another indication that poison of God is the correct definition is that in many Jewish exegetical texts, the snake that tempted Eve was controlled by Samael, or was Samael himself. And the snake has what? Venom, which is a poison. So his name is further tied to poison, and I will get into that a bit later. There are also several more reasons why poison is most likely correct. The exegetical texts pretty much agree that it is poison. In Shnei Luchot HaBrit, Torah Shebechtav, Chaye Sarah, Torah Or 14, it states, the very name Samael reflects the dual nature of evil. On the one hand, the name El, God, is part of the definition. On the other hand, the word Sam represents the Sam Hamavet, or lethal poison. Clearly, they see the name as poison as well. So, where did the blindness of God come from? In some texts that reference the Greek version of the book of Enoch, it states that his name is Samael, which they say was derived from the Aramaic word Sami, which means blind. The literature states that Sami means blind, an etymology which was maintained by some Jewish and non-Jewish sources right on through the Middle Ages. Well, this is true. We find several instances of this throughout the Jewish exegetical texts and some Syriac Aramaic ones where Sami means blindness. In the Klein Dictionary it states, Sama means to be blind or to blind. Simeh and Sima means he blinded or he dazzled. Nisema means became blind. Nistame became blind. Sami was blind. In addition, in Gnostic circles, Samael, often referred to as Yal-Davaoth, was called the blind god, but they were using it as a descriptive term to illustrate his ignorance. He was, quote-unquote, blind to the truth and not the actual meaning of his name. I will get into that in a separate chapter. And in the Testament of Solomon, he is referred to as the demon that, quote-unquote, causes blindness. But again, it does not say his name actually means blindness. So if we return to the Klein Dictionary, it defines Samael's name as Samael, name of the angel of death, compound of Samech Mem, which means drug or poison, and Aleph Lamed, which means God. Even the Talmud agrees in Avodah Zarah 20b. When a sick person is about to die, the angel of death stands above his head, with his sword drawn in his hand, and a drop of poison hanging on the edge of the sword. Once the sick person sees him, he trembles and thereby opens his mouth, and the angel of death throws the drop of poison into his mouth. From this drop of poison, the sick person dies. From it he putrefies. From it his face becomes green. So based on the fact that the Midrashic Hebrew Sam can mean a toxin, and in Arabic it can mean a poison, leads me to believe it is poison of God. There is another and final reason I will mention here as to why I think poison of God is correct. Notice, if we use the example in the Klein Dictionary that Samael is a compound of Samech Mem and Aleph Lamed, it is two words put together, poison and God. This compound doesn't exist if we use the Aramaic. In Aramaic, blindness is Sama. It is one word. To make it Samael, we would need to add a Lamed at the end. But it wouldn't be a compound word since the Aleph, which would form El, is part of the first word, blindness, and not part of the word El. So it wouldn't make sense. It would be blindness with a superfluous last letter. In order to make it blindness of God, using the Aramaic, it would need to be Samech Mem Aleph Aleph Lamed. We would need to add an extra Aleph to form the El, since the first Aleph belongs to the word blind. See what I mean? We would have to alter the spelling of the name to make the Aramaic definition work. But we know that Samael is spelled Samech Mem Aleph Lamed, Samael, without an extra Aleph throughout the Jewish and Aramaic texts, and therefore the case for poison of God is much stronger and, in my mind, final. It just makes sense to me. If people want to use blindness of God because it resonates with them, that is fine. I leave it to the reader to decide which version feels right. I am just stating how it appears from a linguistic standpoint. In the next several chapters, we will go through the history of Samael and see how he has evolved over time. There are a few interesting twists and turns in his narrative. Let's get to it. There you have it, my friends, a chapter from my book, Samael, A History. It is currently in pre-release. If you'd like a copy, I provide a link in the description box below. It states the release date will be June 2nd, but I suspect it will be sooner. With that, I want to thank you again for watching and or listening to this podcast. I will speak to you soon. So mote it be.